Ever since I first started playing guitar, I always dreamt that I'd be in a band and I'd play in front of thousands of people at some amazing music venues. Well, over the last 2.5 weeks, I've essentially been living out that dream. My band, October Drift, got the chance to support the amazing archive around pretty much the whole of France and a show in Luxembourg and Switzerland thrown in for good measure. And these guys are pretty big over there. I wanted to make this video to share what it's like being a guitarist, touring around Europe in an alternative indie band, and break it down into the 5 things that I learned along the way. Now, I know a lot of you that watch this channel are actually American, so I'm not sure this is going to be quite as shocking because you probably have like a 3-hour drive to go and get some groceries or something. But here in England, everywhere that you play within shows, as long as your tour's been routed okay, is kind of 2 to 3 hours away max. This tour, however, we actually started in Marseille, and so from my home here in the southwest of England to Marseille, it's about a 1,000-mile trip. And we basically drove most of it the day before, so we set off super early, and normally we have our own van, but we'd actually hired one that was just a bit bigger that could fit everything in. So we all met up, and then we had to drive to Kent to pick up our sound engineer and the mixing desk and stuff that we'd be using on the tour. And now, before Brexit happened, you could basically just hop straight on the Eurotunnel and go to France. But now you need to get yourself a Canon. And there is a bit of debate whether you actually need one, whether you're in a splitter, but we were just really worried that we'd get turned away at the border if we didn't have one. And basically a Canon just breaks down every piece of equipment that you're carrying with you, with serial numbers and descriptions of everything, and it's all in like a massive list. And you have to get it stamped at every export and import border. So that meant that we had to stop off before getting to Dover to get the Eurotunnel, and you just go into this kind of service area and they stamp your carnet, and they can check and make you pull everything out and kind of match it up, but we were really lucky and they just stamped it and let us go. And then we had to do the same thing in Calais when we got there as well. We had about another 6 or 7 hours to get to our hotel, and we finally arrived about 1 AM, and it was an absolutely brutal drive, but I slept so well that night. And now, this driving didn't end there. We were pretty much, for most of the shows, driving kind of 6 to 7 hours between each show, back to back. So we'd do like a couple of hours in the evening, get to where we were staying, and then have to get up early and then drive again. I think that we worked out for the whole 2.5 weeks, we probably only were possibly able to get 8 hours sleep about twice. And I would just like to mention that in no way am I complaining about this. I don't want like any sympathy. I just purely wanted to show the realities of touring. I mean, if I didn't like it, I would have just stopped long ago. Being given this opportunity and getting to play these amazing shows totally outweighs the absolutely brutal drives. I'd also love to just give a shout out to Vans for Bands, who we hired our van from, because that thing was absolutely bulletproof and it didn't skip a beat the whole trip. And I guess when you become the headline band, that's probably why these drives aren't anywhere near as bad, because you're basically on a tour bus, which means you actually sleep on the bus, and the bus leaves the venue, and then you sleep through the night, and when you wake up, you're at the next venue in another city. So even though it's like a 6-7 hour drive, you're just sleeping that whole time. But for us, we're driving ourselves in that little splitter van and staying in hotels. Well, actually we weren't staying in hotels. As I mentioned, we're the support band, so all the money's not going to us. We basically get paid a little fee for playing, but ultimately it's the opportunity of playing to that many people that makes it worthwhile. And that means we have to do hotels on a bit of a budget. So Chris, the drummer in my band, basically scrolled through endless Airbnbs and found places that were out in the countryside that looked like it had a big enough room to park the van. And I guess because we were staying out in the middle of nowhere, we were getting some like really cool, quirky places. The first day off we had was like just outside the Pyrenees on our way to Toulouse, and we turned up to this place and we had to kind of go and park the van down like this massive hill and almost down by a river in some like old shrubbery. And basically on the way back up, the Airbnb host kind of walked with us and showed us where to park. When we got really near to the house, on the steps there was just this little scorpion, and she's like, "Oh yeah, watch the scorpion." And I had no idea that there were scorpions in France. And then she even said, "Oh, make sure you check your shoes in the morning in case there's some in there." And then another one of the Airbnbs we stayed at, I just came out of the toilet and I thought there was something moving over in the corner, and it turned out to be what's known as a fire salamander. It's like a really cool black and yellow amphibian. And apparently you're not meant to touch them, but we didn't. We basically just opened the door. There was like a little river running down the side of the house, so I imagine that's where it came from. But again, this was at like 3 a.m. and I was like, how is this happening? And then we even got a hot tub on one night too, which was on our day off. And that was absolutely amazing because again, we'd done like a 7-hour drive that day, and just being able to turn up, have a couple of beers and chill out in the hot tub was so nice. But moving on to the third thing that I learned on this tour was that I never got tired of playing these amazing venues to loads of people. I think it would be silly to sit here and talk about anything else and not mention this pretty early on. Archive, the headline band, are pretty big in Europe, and pretty much every night it was between like 1,500 to 2,000, and then with some big shows thrown in. We had like a Lyon one that I think they'd done sort of 4,000 people, and then Paris at the end was at the Accor Arena, which is just this massive arena show. And we basically turn up to these ridiculous venues and load all the stuff in from our van and be greeted by like a team of people who help you, and either the promoter or one of the in-house crew will just show you around to your dressing rooms and stuff. And these dressing rooms are pretty awesome. Check out tonight's dressing room. Look at this bad boy. Look at this stuff. It's pretty sweet. Now, I'm not throwing any shade on the UK venues at all, but the European venues are just really awesome. Like from the way you get treated, to the dressing rooms, and even to like the sound of the venues. You have a lot of big rooms, but they're really heavily acoustically treated. I think a lot of that is actually government funding though. I know that the governments really support the arts there, and they'll like pour money into the venues to keep them in good kind of working order and allow them to like fix stuff. But basically night after night we just get to turn up to these ridiculous venues and play to full crowds. And actually that really does say something about Archives fans, that they came down early and we pretty much had full rooms every single night. And then it all ended in Paris, where we got to play the Accor Arena, which I mentioned is just this massive arena in Paris. And again, it sounds pretty awesome in there, and it was probably one of the best shows I've ever played. But this brings me along to the fourth thing that I learned on that tour, and it's actually related to those venues again, and it's the catering. Now, I think Archive were there for lunch and dinner, but we basically obviously wouldn't have had time. We'd do our sound check at like 5 o'clock, and then by 6 we'd have dinner. And it was always a hard one because the food was just so unbelievably good, but you'd kind of have to time it in a way that you didn't want to like eat too much, because then we'd be playing at 8 o'clock. And I'm not talking about unhealthy stuff as well. The food's like ridiculously nutritious, and there would just be so many options where you could just like pile vegetables on your plate and just kind of get all those vitamins in that you're craving from the lack of sleep. And in terms of how I felt, even though we weren't really sleeping very much and we were doing these like real crazy drives, I felt really good, and I kind of put that down to the food that we were eating. Normally in the UK, again, because of lack of funds, we go to like Wetherspoons and we'll have like a burger and stuff, and I think that really kind of drains you down after a while. And although, like I said, sometimes I misjudged it and went way too heavy on the portions, so I was kind of jumping around the stage feeling all bloated and stuff, it really did seem to just help me in terms of tiredness. But anyway, this brings me to my fifth point, and that is going to be merchandise. Now obviously I mentioned earlier on in the video that we aren't getting paid like a huge fee, and we were kind of trying to keep the costs down. Even with that, once you've paid our tour manager, sound engineer, the van, the hotels, it's still really hard to make money. And basically the only way you can do it is by selling merchandise. I remember hearing this quote before, and it said that being in a band is like the most roundabout way to sell a t-shirt ever. You kind of make all this music and play these shows, and in reality at the end of the show you just stood there as a t-shirt salesman with a little stall. Selling your music and your t-shirts is really the only way you can make those costs back on a tour like this, so it's so important to set up. And I mean, we could have kind of just left after Archive set and headed back early, but we always stayed after all of the show was finished to kind of get those sales in. And in terms of what we sold, most of it was actually music, and that's normally the case when you're supporting, because people haven't heard of you before, so they want to buy your music. And I'm not actually sure that it's because they want to play that individual music. I think they probably just want to support you, they might play the vinyl once or twice, but then they'll listen to you on streaming services instead and just have that as like a memento to probably just show a bit of appreciation to the band. And what I've found playing in a band is that it's so important to go out and sell your merch yourself at this level. Obviously, the headline band can't do that because there's so many people there and they'll just get mobbed. But at this level, if you can go out there and talk to people and kind of, have a little conversation with people, A, I think they're more likely to buy your merch, and B, they're probably more likely to come back and watch your band again. And I have no idea about the full financial breakdown, but I think we made back a lot more money than we thought we were going to. Like I mentioned right at the beginning in this video, these gigs were the sort of things that I dreamt of when I first started playing guitar, and I think it's really kind of the first time, I don't know whether I just allowed myself to appreciate it a little bit more, but it was the first real time that I stood on stage and imagined what the 11-year-old me who had just first started playing guitar would have thought if he knew that I'd be playing to this many people in France with my mates who I was friends with even back then and playing music that we all love. But anyway, it's that time again. Please let me know your thoughts and then watch this video here next. And until next time, keep on making noises.